Welcome into the Big City Sports Podcast. We have another episode coming up, and we're going to be talking about the big trade that the Chicago Bulls made. And then from that, we're going to dive into our MLB season preview. Hello, everybody. It is opening day. Oh my gosh, what a time to be alive. I love opening day. We got robbed of it last year. Fans are going to be at the ballpark. You have hot dogs. You have everything that goes into opening day. But before all that, Slig, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, man. Keeping up on March Madness over the weekend, watching the Sabres losing streak still continue amazingly, up to 18 in a row. Yeah, I've been really productive.
Yeah, that's always good to keep following sports. I mean, that's what we do. And the biggest sports news that took place, at least in the NBA, was the insane trade the Bulls pulled off to get Nikola Vucevic. And he comes over, someone that's played a lot in Orlando and really has been a budding star in the league for a while. Now he gets to a big market and could possibly thrive here in Chicago.
Man, yeah, we definitely got to talk about that trade because I know that caught both of us off guard. The trade was getting Vucevic, and they also got Alfaro Camino and Daniel Tyson separate trades. But the key one was Vucevic in exchange for Wendell Carter, Otto Porter's expiring contract, and first-round picks in 2021 and 2023. So it was the biggest trade pulled off by any team at the trade deadline, I would say. Vucevic has been an all-star center a couple of times in his career. He is a very good offensive player who can stretch the floor, is a good shooter, and could form a very, very interesting inside-out combination with Zach LaVine.
Yeah, he could. And you look at this team now. I love this move because you get rid of your trash that was not, I don't want to call them trash. I'm sure they're good players, good people. But you look at the people that they were. You look at Wendell Carter. He was not the best, let's be honest. You look at Otto Porter. You got rid of that contract. That's huge because he was obviously someone that a lot of people didn't think you could get rid of, but you did. And you get your own AK stamps on this. It's not Garpax that made this move. And you get rid of your Garpax garbage that you had, and now you're really bringing in this new regime, if you will, and you could really market yourself to some of these teams coming up or players coming up in the free agency that's like, hey, look, come to Chicago. We have LaVine. We have Vucevic. We just need one more piece. We got some people here. Look, we might be a competitive basketball team. I love this move for AK.
It's very possible, man. There's a lot of different ways to look at this trade, in my opinion. Really quick, we can talk about what the Bulls gave up, and then we'll talk about short-term and long-term outlook after the trade. In terms of what they gave up, Wendell Carter is the biggest piece, the top, I believe, 7th overall pick 2 or 3 drafts ago, who's been up and down. He's been injured. He's not a good defensive player. He was sent out. Porter, honestly, like normally I would agree, but you can trade him because this is the last year of his contract, and he'll be a free agent anyway. So in that instance, it doesn't matter. Long term, we'll get into what giving up those 2 first-round picks will mean here in a minute, I believe. But in terms of the package, Carter to me doesn't have a super high ceiling. He could be a productive role player, maybe even a low-end starter, but that's about all I see for him. I do like the impact Porter had off the bench, but it was clear that he wasn't going to be part of the long-term plans. Vucevic is, to me, one of the more underrated players in the NBA, but in terms of saying budding star, he's been in the league long enough where I think it's fair to say you know what he is, and he's a very good offensive player who is more than capable of putting up 20 and 10 a night, but he also has defensive limitations. We cannot ignore that. He's not exactly going to come down and be Shaq and anchoring the paint. He's going to be similarly flawed on the defensive end, which fits in with most of the Bulls roster as a whole, and sliding him next to Lauri Markkanen on defense could be a nightmare. I mean, that could be an absolute sieve on that end of the court.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. He doesn't make a lot of great plays defensively. He gets burned. His rebounding is pretty solid, but then again, it's like the defensive side of the ball is his weakness. And I talked to my buddy Abe, who's in depth, insane with the Bulls and stuff, and he's like, he's like, you look at it. I think he said, I'm quoting him. He said, I think it makes a lot of sense to bring in someone like him that could really help bring a superstar look to the Chicago Bulls. Like, we're not calling him a superstar right now, but Vucevic is a solid player that can come in and play. And yes, they didn't get any much better on the defensive side, any more better, I should say. But you could still see he's still a massive upgrade to Wendell Carter.
Yes, that there's no doubt there. And in terms of a very good player, he is an all-star. It's just he has his limitations. You could definitely make the argument he's a top 30, 40 player in the NBA, somewhere in that range, I would say. And he's been productive for several years on the Magic. And I think it's fair to say that that's going to continue. He's definitely somebody who can space the floor extremely well. And well, let's talk about this short term for the Bulls first, right? Uh, right now, you bring Vucevic and pair him with Zach LaVine. And we see the potential that Patrick Williams has been oozing all season. Again, a bit of a project, a little bit raw, but the all-star potential, I think, is there. I'm not trying to heighten expectations, but those three could be the three core members of the Bulls, at least momentarily, while they try to appeal to a bigger name in the summer, right? The Eastern Conference is pretty shitty outside of the top three teams this year in the 76ers, the Nets, and the Bucks. I think as of the time of recording, the Knicks are in fourth place and they're one game above 500. So the rest of the Eastern Conference is very, very tightly compact. The Bulls, I think, are in ninth or 10th place right now at the time of recording. Short term, I feel like this is a move that should get them into the playoffs, at the very least into the play-in series between seed 7 and 10, right? Do you think that's a fair expectation?
I think so. And I talked about being buyers or sellers in one of the episodes, and they went with the buying plan, and I liked it. I mean, I believe I said in the episode that I wanted them to do so because it gives the young players playoff experience. And that's what you have. You're going to get playoff experience here. And even if they don't make the playoffs, somehow they miss, I still think it's okay because you have Vucevic for multiple years, and you still can look at this as a developmental project. Like, look, you're playing with real players out there now. Like if you're Patrick Williams, if you're Kobe White, oh my gosh, don't even get me started on Kobe White. I'm starting to boil over the top with this dude. But anyway, you give them superstar players on the floor, and it could really help their progress. Playoffs or not, you'd ideally want to make the playoffs, especially pulling off a move of this caliber. But it only helps you going into next season knowing, look, you're under Billy Donovan. You have a good head coach. You have a smart GM, or at least we'll see on this trade. But I think it's starting to come all together for this Bulls team. And I don't think win-loss will end up telling the real story on the end of this season, but it's more what can it do going forward.
Well, that's the big question. I will get into the long term here in just a second. I went back and found the episode we last talked about the Bulls. Like you said, you mentioned you wanted them to pick a path, either buy or sell. They ended up buying. The what I was saying is more at the. I said something along the lines of the Bulls wanted to take the season, evaluate some of the players they had, and then they could change their minds later. And they sure as hell did. They changed their minds later, all right. Neither one of us were entirely off base, so that's good. In terms of the Vucevic trade, I don't think there's any doubt that it improves the Bulls in the short term. It could definitely get them into the playoffs, but we have to remember one thing. Bulls get into the playoffs, they're losing in the first round. They're not, if they get up to the 4 or 5 seed, they could win the first round in that situation. But if they are a seed 6 or below, they are going to lose to one of the top 3 teams in the East, assuming they're healthy, right? I think that's a fair expectation. So the Bulls gave up their first round pick in this upcoming draft. It's still going to be somewhere between 15 and 20. That's a very significant draft pick. The 2023 pick, ideally for the Bulls, if they improve, is going to be in the 20s, which wouldn't be so damaging. But the Bulls are still nowhere near a complete team, and giving up a pick that's probably going to end up just outside the lottery, to me, could be very damaging. Short term, high upside, should make the playoffs if everyone is healthy. But long term, giving up 2 first round picks. Zach LaVine is a free agent after the 2022 season, so not this year but next year. If he doesn't like this, or if the free agents don't come in the offseason, or just any variable like that, he has a ton of leverage now. He can get his way out of Chicago very, very easily. Might force the Bulls to trade him if instead of losing him for nothing, if he makes it clear he doesn't want to stay. Vucevic is a free agent after 23, so they have an extra year of control with him. But to me, they're very good players. They're not elite players. So to me, the long-term ceiling of the Bulls might have been lowered a little bit because Vucevic and LaVine, LaVine's taken a big step forward, but I still feel like we kind of know the best that these 2 players are going to be. And to me, they're not good enough to win a championship.
Yeah, to your point, you talk about earlier, if this helps them this year, they're going to make the playoffs. They're going to get eliminated. There's no chance they win a title this year or even get further. But I think going forward, the only way for this to work out, I shouldn't say the only, one of the ways this will work out is if you can land these big free agents. And I think AK, Arturas Karnisovas, the president of basketball ops there, Mark Eversley, another one. I think those two can come together and really try to sell people to come to Chicago. And it's sort of like an all-in move, but these are the kind of moves that AK is going to make, and they come from a smart, justified place in his head in which Garpax didn't. So you're making these moves that are smart, and you're trying to pursue free agents in the offseason, and there's only something that can happen there. If they get someone big, it could help huge. If not, then you could be setting yourself up for a little bit of a, not necessarily a rebuild, but a lot of mediocrity.
I definitely see the logic with the trade. It's very clear the Bulls are pushing their chips to the table. They're going all in. That was clear from the instant this trade was announced. So I definitely agree. I understand the thought process behind it, but I definitely think it's fair to question long term. Could it limit the ceiling a little bit? If Levine and Vucevic are both re-signed on major contracts in a year or two, what's going to happen with Patrick Williams? Or if he ends up realizing that potential, and right now it seems like a possibility, and he gets a big contract. Yes, the salary cap can only go so many places is essentially what I'm getting at. And I definitely think it's fair to ask, is that a core that can win a championship? I don't think it is, at least at the moment. So that's where I'm coming from in terms of the long term. And then if it doesn't work out very well in the short term, which isn't impossible if somebody gets injured or something like that, you don't have a lottery pick to help fix it in the offseason. So the Bulls could definitely be going for a guy like Lonzo Ball. We've talked about that before. They're going to, I understand big market. They're being aggressive. Karnisovas is putting his fingerprints on the team. And we talked about his scouting European background, and going for Vucevic kind of fits in with that philosophy. But short term, long term, like you can definitely see the floor raised, but I think the ceiling is a little bit lower at the moment down the line.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. It makes a lot of sense. I think this team, it's going to be a wait and see approach. And I know that's sort of cliche, but it is. I mean, right now, we're probably going to end up making the playoffs, but outside of that, it's just going to be up in the air. So it's going to be a little bit till we see what the Bulls can do, but I'm excited to see what it takes.
Yeah, if Zach LaVine is going to be kept when he hits free agency, he's getting a max contract. So you have to keep that in mind. He has the leverage. If he is not really, really stupid, or if he does not have a terrible agent, it's either give me a max contract or I'm forcing my way out of here. And he has every right to do it. So it's just, that's the risk. If him and Vucevic pair well, they could definitely be a high floor, upper echelon Eastern team. But do you see him beating a team like Philadelphia or the Nets? I don't. I really just don't see that. Now, going back to the defensive end, where the Bulls have had their biggest struggles all season, they did make another smaller trade that we can hit on. They picked up Daniel Tice from the Celtics. They brought in Al-Farouq Aminu as well in the Vucevic deal. They sent out Luke Cornett to Boston, as well as Daniel Gafford and Chandler Hutchison to the Magic in the trade. What do you think of that move?
I like it. I mean, you're bringing in veteran pieces, and I think that's what they want. They want these veteran pieces in Tice and Farouk Aminu to come in, because look, Chandler Hutchison, he might end up being a decent NBA player, but he's not giving you anything other than another body in the room that's super young. You bring in these older players that have been there, done that, and they could really show leadership. Sort of that Thaddeus Young role, who is now on the bench. But I think it could really do wonders for this team, bringing in these older players, because it only helps in your development of these younger players, so they can go and see these players every single day and see how they go about their business at the NBA level. And it could only help.
No, I definitely see the logic behind it. Yeah, I misspoke, by the way. Gafford and Hutchison were sent to the Wizards, not the Magic. I apologize. Separate trade. But Aminu's been a good defender his entire career. Tice, you can make the argument, is the best backup center in the NBA. Or is he? Is he the favorite of Celtics fans? No, I wouldn't say so. And his swan song ended up being missing a wide open game winner the night before the trade. But I definitely like him as a backup insurance policy for Vucevic. He's going to be a big part of the rotation. Thaddeus Young, who's had a bit of a renaissance bounce back year. I've talked about how much I've liked his fit. Him, Garrett Temple, Aminu are solid veteran players who are going to be coming off the bench and providing a little bit of support to this younger, not so defensively minded team. But you look at the Eastern Conference, the Knicks are amazingly still in the playoff picture at the moment. Charlotte and Atlanta are starting to stabilize a little bit. The Heat have bounced back after a slow start, Jimmy Butler. So the Bulls should make the playoffs or at least make it into the play-in tournament, but I don't see them moving up to fourth or fifth in the East, which would allow them to avoid Philadelphia, the Nets, or the Bucks in the first round.
That's fair. I think that's a solid point. And last thing on the Bulls, real quick, before we get into the baseball preview, I have one thing. You talked about earlier, Levine possibly having the leverage, right? What if things don't go well and Levine wants out? You could restock your picks that you gave away in the Vucevic deal that could help you out later on in the future. So there could still be that underlying factor of, hey, you could still build.
There could. If Levine forces his way out, you can get at least one first round pick for him, even if he's a rental at next season's trade deadline. However, the teams that are going to be in position to get him are going to be playoff teams, and the picks you get are going to be 27th overall instead of 16th, for example. So you can, and the odds of them getting anyone of Levine's caliber at 16 are really slim, much less at the end of the first round. So it's just something to keep in mind. They can definitely get some picks back, but the odds of those picks turning into all-star players are low.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100% on that. But let's head over to the Cubs. Let's get into some baseball talk. And the Chicago Cubs, this team going forward, is interesting to say the least. We talked about earlier in the earlier in these show episodes. Adbert Alzolay, someone that we weren't sure if he was going to make the rotation, and Alec Mills potentially being someone there. They have Trevor Williams, a lot of rotation pieces there. Alzolay, despite having a pretty porous spring, ended up getting the 5 spot in the rotation. Alec Mills now the swingman in the bullpen. I think this is an interesting move because of the service time. I mean, look, Alzolay was gifted an extra year of service time to where he could have been sent down, or another option. He was gifted another option to where he could have been sent down, but they thought, why not give him a crack in the rotation?
I mean, he's a high risk, high upside kind of player. We'll definitely have that as a theme later in the episode, I think. But in terms of the Cubs rotation right now, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like the 5 are going to be Hendricks, Arrieta, Zach Davies, Williams, and Alzolay to start the season. Is that correct?
Correct. They're going with Arrieta at the 2.
Okay. And to me, Hendricks, I really do like him. We've talked about that before, but I think Zach Davies, to me, has the upside to be the best number 2 in that rotation at this point in his career. Arrieta, I like him as that clubhouse veteran presence who should be a decently stable pitcher. I think he could improve from what he was with the Phillies the last couple of seasons, but he's not going to be the 2016 Jerick Arrieta anymore either, I don't think. Trevor Williams, to me, is a middle of the pack, number 4 or 5 starter. Alzolay's got the best pure stuff in the Cubs rotation, but he also needs a lot of work being a young pitcher with command, control, everything like that, right? So I don't think you can expect too much consistency from him in year 1.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, it's weird because this team, there's no one that throws hard in that rotation. I mean, I guess Alzolay now getting the crack, he throws about 94, but outside of that, everyone throws about 92. And they wanted to preach defense, and that's where I saw why they brought in Jock Peterson instead of Schwarber, because they're going to put the ball in play a lot. And the infield defense, a lot of ground balls. You have Chris Bryant, and an interesting note that took place is the Cubs sent down Nico Horner to their alternate site, which is a big shock. He hasn't had a single AAA at bat. If he's down for 36 days, it could be another Chris Bryant situation with service time because he'd get another year. But David Bodie and Eric Sogard are going to be the platoon at second base, and Matt Duffy made the roster.
Yeah, no, that was actually what I was going to bring up next is the infield decision. Nico Horner being sent down. The way David Ross phrased it was more about what Bodie can do rather than what Horner wasn't doing. But do you think it's fair to say that Horner doesn't have the same I guess, prestige or shine that some of the Cubs prospects have had in recent years that were called up with Javier Baez and Wilson Contreras and guys like that? It just seems like the quality of these top end guys for the Cubs has decreased a little bit in recent years. Is that fair to say?
Oh, it has. And I think it's evident. I mean, Nico Horner, he kind of reminds me of like a David Eckstein without the speed. So someone that just plays second base, makes contact. He's not going to have a ton of power, but I think like you saw about Javi, he's got the flashy skills. Bryant has this insane power. Jorge Soler was even on the Cubs before he got traded. Eloy Jimenez, we'll get into him. But you look at the Cubs. I mean, every single year the prospects, like you said, have gone worse and worse. We were excited about Victor Caratini. The dude was a backup catcher.
Right. I mean, it just goes to, and that happens after a team who won the World Series a few years ago, invested a lot of resources to do that. There's definitely some logic as to why the quality's decreased a little bit. Most of the top guys are already on the team or were traded for something to help them immediately in 2016. We've talked about the infield a little bit. That seems to be relatively set. Bodie is the right-handed bat, and Eric Sogard is going to get most of the at-bats against right-handed pitchers. So we'll see how the playing time ends up being split between those two. One question that I wanted to ask was at the catcher spot. So you mentioned Caratini being a backup catcher. Wilson Contreras will obviously be the starter, but Austin Romine is hurt, and he was the favorite to be the backup catcher before the season, right? So what do you think the Cubs are going to do to spell Contreras?
Well, it appears that PJ Higgins is going to get his chance, and he's been in the system for a long, long, long time. I mean, he's one of those catchers that have just been around in minor league baseball for a very long time. And I mean, I like what I saw. I seen him play in South Bend. He was there for, I believe, 2 years, which is how long he's been in the minors. But he plays every infield position. I not take that back. He's probably not he's not an MLB shortstop, but he's a solid catcher. He's good defensively. I don't think his bat isn't necessarily that good, but I think Contreras is going to log a ton of innings. He's going to catch a ton to start the season, and hope that Higgins is just more of an insurance policy or a Sunday starter just to spell someone. Because I mean, maybe you see Alzolay catch Alzolay a little bit younger. Maybe he goes to the minors. Those two gel together, but I don't know. I think right now he's going to be a stopgap until Romine comes back.
Man, it'd be kind of interesting to see a number 5 starter with his own personal catcher. You don't usually see that unless it's a knuckleballer. But I definitely see the logic behind it because Contreras might not have that chemistry or rapport with him yet. In terms of the Cubs lineup, at least if everyone's healthy, the starters are playing that opening day lineup. One thing I do think is some balance in the lineup. You got a few decent bats on both the left and right side. And I know we'll talk about that with all 4 of these teams here. But for the Cubs, you got Jock Peterson as a left-handed bat, Ian Happ, Jason Hayward, Anthony Rizzo. From the right side, you have Javier Baez, Chris Bryant, Bodie, so Contreras. You see the balance there where you can alternate left and right, make it more difficult on opposing bullpens. But I think it's fair to ask, what is the upside of this Cubs offense going to be? Because they couldn't get a hit in the playoffs last season. That's been a theme the last couple of years. They've made it to October, and I haven't seen them really do anything to correct that, frankly.
It's run production. It's simple as that. You look at these players, I don't think a single one of them has had over 100 RBIs in like 2 years. And that says a lot. You look at this roster, like right now, the opening day lineup, I would assume, is Happ, Bryant, Rizzo, Baez, Peterson, Contreras, Hayward, Bodie, pitcher spot. So that's switch right, left, pitcher. And you look at that, what it tells you is there's some depth on that roster and that lineup, but you're going to need some big years out of some big players. Rizzo's going to have to find his power. He lost a ton of weight going into summer camp last year. He tried to tone up and it didn't work. So he tried beefing up a little bit more this season to bring up his power numbers. He's in a contract year, and he ended the discussions today with the Cubs saying, you had all spring to get it locked up. Look, I'm going out there playing the end of this right now. And I think that's good. I mean, obviously for this team, the long-term future isn't bright. But Bryant on a contract year, Baez on a contract year, Rizzo on a contract year. If they want to produce, they got to show up right now. So it's going to be interesting. If they can find a way to get runs, it's going to be because they feel that added pressure of a payday coming up.
It's make or break is kind of how it's phrased in a contract year. And the Cubs are in such a weird spot after a very tough offseason where Theo Epstein's gone, Jed Hoyer comes in. The mandate to cut costs is very evident. Yu Darvish is traded, Kyle Schwarber's gone, John Lester's gone. They did bring in Jock Peterson to replace Schwarber, but outside of Zach Davies, there weren't any super high-end additions to the rotation, I'd say. Arrieta's more of a veteran, middle of the rotation guy, right? So it's just on paper, the Cubs have not gotten better. And they're in a tough spot because their main players, like you mentioned from the core, are approaching free agency. And the Cubs, judging by their financial approach this offseason, aren't going to be keeping all of them. So I'm really curious to see if one or two or all three of them are traded at the deadline before they're lost for nothing, depending on how the Cubs season goes. You look at the NL Central, and frankly, nobody really did a lot in the offseason outside of the Cardinals being handed Nolan Arenado on a silver platter. So the Pirates, we all know, are going to suck. But I didn't see Milwaukee or Cincinnati really make any big moves to improve this offseason. So despite all the Cubs' flaws, I could definitely still see them finishing second in the division. But it would be, to me, a second in the division with 85 wins and an early wild card exit or something like that. I don't see a lot of untapped potential on this team. I think we've seen a lot of guys kind of run their course. I mean, I know you've talked about getting rid of Chris Bryant for 2 years now, and I think it's more and more feasible if he's approaching free agency. So to me, it's the Cubs had a very bizarre offseason, and they're in a weird spot both now and long term.
It's gonna be something when it gets to July, because if you have a solid year, I don't care what the record is. This might sound insane. I don't care what the record is in May. If Craig Kimbrell has an ERA at 2 or under, I'm selling him right then and there. I'm getting him off this roster, and I'm saying, look, we need to start making some moves. Kimbrell is making big money. He's going to start slumping eventually. That's just a fact. And when you get him off this roster, you're like, hey, we have someone like Brandon Workman that can come in and close. It's not the worst thing in the world. You get rid of his contract, it frees up money to pay someone like Baez, pay someone like Rizzo, God forbid, pay someone like Bryant. And then it helps you. It helps you long term, because you're getting rid of someone that you only got 2 good months out of him in his entire Cubs career. And if you could get him out of your mess right away, it could only do wonders. And then you look at the pitching rotation. Zach Davies, they got him with the trade for Yu Darvish. He's on a 1-year deal, like you said. But if he's pitching well, I think they wait until like July to see with him. But you could get a pretty solid deal for him if he's pitching like maybe a 3 ERA. This is all like hypothetical, best case scenario. But then again, it all depends on the record when they get to that point of the season. But if you can trade Craig Kimbrell, I don't care what month it is. If it's April and he's getting calls, I'm accepting that trade right away, because I cannot stand that guy in the 9th inning.
The only thing I would caution with that is if you trade him early in the season, you might be setting the market too low for yourself, and you can see other relievers, who might be of lesser recognition, because we know what Craig Kimbrell was in his peak, or with the Padres, with the Red Sox, with the Braves. To me, you want to be careful there, because closers are a hot commodity. If you sell him too early, you might not get good value for him. Even if you don't like him, there's going to be some team that's willing to overpay for him, right? And if somebody's willing to overpay, let him. That can help the Cubs build up the team or address a couple of holes on the roster. But in terms of the immediate start to the season here, I wanted to talk about the bullpen really quick. So outside of Kimbrell and Brandon Workman, to a lesser extent, maybe Ryan Tepera, however the hell you say it, I am really curious to get your thoughts on Dylan Maples, because to me, he seems like the Cubs version of the wild card. What's he going to bring to the bullpen, right? Talented, but incredibly inconsistent.
Oh man, don't get me started on Maples. Oh my gosh. He has some of the nastiest stuff that you've seen. And I'm going to be honest, if you think I'm nuts, I think he has top 10 stuff out of a bullpen arm right now in Major League Baseball. And you're like, look at this dude's ERA. He's not good. Look at his spin. He spins the ball better than almost anybody in baseball, but he plunks every batter. He walks 15 guys an outing, and every single time he's thrusted into big league action, it's just not there. He's going to be one of those guys you designate for assignment. Someone picks him up, like Tampa Bay. He becomes a 42 save closer. He's going to go out there, pitch to a sub-1 ERA, and have an insane season, because he's got the nastiest dart and cut and everything with his pitches, but the Cubs can't get him right. And this goes back to developing pitching. The Cubs haven't developed pitching since Jeff Samardzija, someone that they have drafted and groomed. Maples is their only shot, and they've tried doing this for 3 years, and it hasn't worked. I'd be shocked if he's on this roster past April, because he'll have a sky-high ERA of 8. He'll get designated. Someone will pick him up, and like I said, he's going to go off and just start spinning balls and missing bats like he's the best thing since sliced bread.
I mean, that's why I brought him up as the wild card, right? The upside is tremendous with him, but the floor is incredibly low. And unfortunately for the Cubs, for the most part, they've seen the floor more than they've seen the ceiling. And he's definitely a guy where he could easily go blossom for another team. And I know we can talk about somebody like that on just about every team, but some guys just don't work in the big market or for the original organization that they're drafted from. And Maples could be that guy, but if he takes a step forward, I mean, the upside with him, he could eventually be a closer. It's just the talent is there. With Jonathan Holder and Rowan Wick out at the beginning of the season in the bullpen, I feel like Maples will have his best opportunity to showcase what he can really do.
Yeah, I mean that's one a positive outlook. He's gonna get some innings. Hopefully it's in a 5-0 blowout and you can bring him in like the 8th inning or something. Just get him some work. If he comes in a 1-run game, I'm gonna have to drive all the way to Chicago and have some choice words with David Ross. But it's definitely something. But going forward, what do you see this Cubs record and where do you see them finishing?
I think I'm going to just stick with what I kind of said as the hypothetical a minute ago. I'm going to go 85 and 77 if they play a full 162. Obviously, that's a big if for every team, but 85 and 77, second in the NL Central is where I'm going to put them right now.
I have the Cubs finishing third in the Central. I'll actually go through everybody. I have the Brewers in first place, Cardinals come in
Mm.
second, Cubs in third, Reds in fourth, Pirates in fifth. And the reason I say that, Craig Counsell, he could have the worst baseball team in history. He still finds a way to win 85, 90 games and make the playoffs. I mean, you look at his team last year, he had a horrible year with Christian Yelich, and they still found a way to make the playoffs. I mean, he's such a great manager. The pitching rotation isn't bad. If they get Corbin Burns mixed with Woodruff, what they have there, I think it's okay. Devin Williams had a nice year. They brought in Jackie Bradley, Colton Wong. They're starting to play some defense. I think this team could be interesting. They play defense. They're getting rid of Arcia, or he's more in a backup role. Urias is a shortstop there. They're moving their defensive liability of Keston Hiura to first base. I think this Brewers team is going to win the NL Central.
That would be something, man. I mean, it's just because Council last year, the Brewers definitely took a bit of a step back from 2019. I would definitely be curious to see because like I like Jackie Bradley as a defender. I like Colton Wong as the second base consistency, but I don't think either one of them have huge upsides at this point in their careers. So I just to me they kind of fit in with the Brewers manufacturing a decent team out of a bad roster. So that's kind of where I see it. The Reds to me are the biggest wild card because they have such a talented pitching staff. But Sonny Gray I know is out to start the season. We'll see if Luis Castillo can repeat what he did last year. We all know the Pirates are finishing last, right?
Yeah, Pirates. I don't even know who their opening day starter is. It might be Paul Maholm. Might be throw a name in there from 50 years. Maybe it's Aaron Harang. Who knows?
God, is he still pitching?
No, he's not. He's not pitching. Maybe
You could have
Zambrano.
fooled me. I feel like he's been around since 1986.
Maybe Carlos Zambrano will make an appearance. But anyway, let's head over to Chicago. He played for the Chicago Dogs, believe it or not, a few seasons ago. But that's not the only Chicago team we're going to talk about next. We're getting into the Chicago White Sox, and this team is oozing with potential. But then, of course, you have the frightening, scary injury to Eloy Jimenez trying to rob a home run in a preseason game. That's just a scary sight.
Yeah, Jimenez is going to be out 5 to 6 months, which means he's going to be out well past the All-Star break. The White Sox will hope to get him back in September for a playoff push, which is a real shame. Unfortunately, Jimenez has had a handful of injuries like this before. He got I believe it was the concussion out in the outfield last season. So I mean, it's a recurring theme for him, and that's definitely something that's going to temper expectations slightly. But the White Sox were incredibly aggressive in the offseason. It's going to be a two-team race, I think, between them and the Twins to win the AL Central.
It will, and I like a couple of those teams in there. I think the Royals got better. I think the Tigers are. I'm not even going to say it. I mean, they got better veterans, but anyway, you look at this White Sox team. They're stacked. I mean, you lose Eloy, that's a lot of run production that you miss, but you still have Jose Abreu, who drives in 120 with his eyes closed. You have Nick Madrigal, who's going to get an everyday role at second base, a lot of speed, really grindy, kind of like Altuve. I apologize for saying his name. But then you look at Tim Anderson, who could be better with the glove, but he could be the AL batting champion. He gets on base a lot. Moncada, a lot of this, I see this roster right now. the loss of Eloy Jimenez, everything falls on the shoulders of Yohan Moncada. He's got to step up. He's got to hit 285. He's got to drive in runs, and he has to be the mainstay in that lineup.
Yeah, Mankata's somebody who had a bit of a rough 2020 season, and you're going to need the young guys like him, like Robert, like Madrigal to step up in his absence. But it also shows the depth that the White Sox lineup has, because Abreu was insane last year. Wasn't he the AL MVP?
He was. And then,
I mean, and I don't think it's impossible that Tim Anderson can do the same thing this year, because he was top 10 in the voting. He's proven himself to be an incredibly entertaining player to watch, a great hitter, just provides a lot of enthusiasm and spark to a team that hasn't had much for most of the last 15 years since they won the World Series in 05. It's just been, you see the sportsman-like guys like Paul Konerko and Adam Dunn here and there. And I like those guys. Well, Konerko I liked. Adam Dunn was a weird guy, but now you see the influx of youth and that upside and talent that they haven't had for a long time. And I wanted to see, I'm really curious to see how that meshes with bringing back an 80-year-old Tony La Russa as the manager, which to me is a really conflicting approach, because you got an older guy who, while he's still been in baseball, hasn't managed in 10 years now. And it kind of, I know this is the wrong sport, but it kind of reminds me of the Flames bringing back Daryl Sutter in hockey, because Sutter got them to a Stanley Cup Finals in 2004. They lost that final. The Flames never got back. They just brought him back a few weeks ago. The White Sox, Jerry Reinsdorf kind of made it clear they had unfinished business with La Russa, was the manager 35 years ago. And to me, it gives off a similar vibe. They never won a World Series then. They're trying to do it now, but I don't love that fit.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I feel like Tony's the guy that he has the veteran leadership. I mean, my gosh, he's not even a veteran; he's a senior. But you look at him, and he's someone that you bring him in, and he's an older guy that could really gel with this team. I think he will. I think he has these young, fiery personalities on the team that are going to be like that. He could be a father figure to those players and teach them the way at the big league level. Because I can't remember where this came from, so I apologize. But Albert Pujols got a text from, I can't remember who it was on the White Sox either. One of the younger players on the White Sox sent a text to Albert Pujols and said, "How should I feel about Tony La Russa?" He said he's the best manager that a man could ask for, because even Pujols at a younger age was being under the threshold of La Russa, who was, let's be honest, he was 20 years younger at the time. And he still helped him out a lot. And I think he can adapt to the newer game, because we've already seen him start the trend a little bit of the pitcher batting eighth. And I think he can really adapt to today's game and kind of gel with these younger players.
I don't think it's impossible. I just think there's going to be a bit of a transition period, because he's been out of the dugout for so long, and baseball's changed a lot in the last 10 years, and more of that emotion and youthful exuberance is in the game than ever before. And La Russa might not be the best fit for that, or it might just take him some time to adjust to it. I am really curious to see what happens there. And La Russa didn't get off to a great start in his return, because we mentioned the DUI he had about a week after he was hired, and that's his second one. And I'm not here to criticize his personal life, but it's just, especially in a market like Chicago, it's just one more factor to consider if something like that were to become a problem, because I feel like if there's a third one, he's getting fired immediately, and that could put a wrench in the team's plans, right? In terms of the offseason, I think we got to talk about how aggressive they were. We'll get into the pitching staff here, but they made some big moves bringing in Lance Lynn. They've got Liam Hendricks, the top reliever on the market. So what do we expect from this White Sox pitching staff?
I love it. I think it's the best pitching staff in Major League, or best pitching staff in the American League, not Major League Baseball. I'm not going to discredit the Dodgers, not going to discredit the Padres or potentially the Mets, but I am going to say here that this is the best pitching staff in the American League. And you look at it top to bottom. You have someone, a leader in Lucas Giolito. He's very solid. Then you have Dallas Keuchel, who's sort of that guy that just gives you innings and just will pitch his heart out. He's a lefty in the rotation. That's solid. Then you bring in Lance Lynn. That's a big splash. I loved it from the start. Dane Dunning, I think, is still going to be a solid MLB pitcher, someone that can sort of like a grindy guy that gets a lot of outs. But I think he's going to be solid in Texas, especially in that new ballpark. But Lance Lynn comes over. Kopech's going to be nice. Dylan Cease showed flashes last year. Then you get to the bullpen. I mean, my gosh. Garrett Crochet pumping 100. You got Liam Hendricks down there. Great year out of Matt Foster, I believe it was last year. And there's just a ton of youth in that pitching rotation and bullpen. And I think there's some depth too, because Carlos Rodon was brought back, and he's I don't know how a lot of White Sox fans feel about him.
Well, that's the next thing I'm going to bring up. So the top three of the rotation, when they're healthy, Giolito, Keuchel, Lynn, they're going to be set. The 4 and 5. So Dylan Cease is going to start the season as the number 4. Still a relatively small sample size, but there's definitely some talent there. But there's also going to be more pressure on him. I think the pitching depth in the starting rotation isn't that great here, because Carlos Rodon is going to be the number 5, right? Now, he's had a very good spring, beat out Reynaldo Lopez for the job. And at some point a starter is going to get hurt, miss a start, something like that in all likelihood, right? Right now, Reynaldo Lopez is the only other guy in the organization that I could see stepping in and making a few starts for the White Sox immediately. And they probably won't be very good ones, frankly. He's had a rough spring. So I definitely see the pitching upside, but getting rid of a guy like Dunning, that's somebody who can take away from the pitching depth, in my opinion. Now, the bullpen, we talk about Hendricks, who's going to replace Alex Colomé as the closer. He got that big contract that I think he deserves. I like that move a lot. We know Garrett Crochet's got the upside, but we'll see if he ends up being like the White Sox version of Alzolay or Dylan Maples, who has the great stuff. We got to make sure he has the command, especially early in his career. It's something that all young pitchers struggle with, at least to an extent, right? They still have Aaron Bummer, though. I mean, this is still an above average bullpen with a lot of depth, despite losing Colomé to the Twins. And we'll see how much that ends up backfiring. But Liam Hendricks is still, to me, a top 5 closer in Major League Baseball. The top 3 pitchers are a top 10 staff, but I do have some questions about the back end of the rotation, because as much as Rodon's had a good spring, I feel like it's fair to question how much you can trust him to do that consistently.
Yeah, I guess that brings up a good point. You bring up a good point there. Yeah, I mean, the defense, or not the defense. Come on now, the back end of the bullpen, or the back end of the rotation isn't the best, but Kopech is the outlier. I feel like Kopech is someone that it's going to take him a little bit. I mean, my gosh, you talk about a rough year. He was atop the list on people with rough years, but I mean, he's coming back. He's got Tommy John. I think he's going to be an outlier for this team, and someone that could really step in down the stretch and really make some big starts. I'm going to go out on a limb here. This is the first, maybe second bold prediction I've made during this show, and it is that Michael Kopech will end up being the number 3 starter by the end of the year.
I could definitely see it, but I'm really curious to see what his role is. I wouldn't be surprised if he started out in the bullpen just to build up his arm strength a little bit, just because he had the Tommy John surgery. He opted out last season, and he was one of the centerpieces brought back in the Chris Sale trade when he was sent over to Boston, and he just hasn't been able to stay healthy, unfortunately, and voluntarily opted out last season. So it's just he's got a ton of talent. He could be the best pitcher on the staff, but it's definitely a high risk, high reward kind of situation with him. I think it's fair to say that of Dylan Cease as well. He's probably going to be a little bit feast or famine. And same with Rodon. Reynaldo Lopez, I don't think has the upside, depending on what his role is going to be, to have too many of those big, good starts. I think he's more going to be just a number 5. Hopefully in there, maybe they use him as the long man or a swing guy between the rotation and the bullpen. But outside of that, I mean, like I said, upside is there. I don't think the depth is quite as strong as everyone thinks it is, at least immediately. I feel like it's something they might address at the trade deadline.
Yeah, and don't tell Rodon's wife that he's might be in a swing role, because she says he's a starting pitcher. She started going nuts about that on Twitter a few years ago. But anyway, let's head into the lineup real quick at the very end. We didn't touch on Adam Eaton. I think he's someone nice that they brought back. Could be a table setter up there. Him, and if you put him and Madrigal at the top, get guys that get on base for people like Eloy and some of the others. Grandal should have a good bounce back. And they also had a young catcher make the team in Yerman Mercedes. He made the team today. He's going to be the backup catcher this season. Of course, they lost James McCann, but I'm interested. I think this lineup, and Adam Engel's probably going to take over some time in left field with the injury to Eloy, but I'm just excited for this team.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Eaton move a lot. He's definitely an upgrade over Nomar Bizarra, but Eaton is also 32, and he's had some injury concerns the last few years with the Nationals. And considering Eloy is going to be out for the vast majority of the season, at least, it is definitely something to consider because I like Adam Engel in a fourth outfielder kind of role. I don't want him to be the everyday guy, ideally. Regardless of Eaton's health, though, I'm curious to see if Andrew Vaughn is going to get any reps in left field. I know the White Sox are high on him. He's a first baseman by trade, but they've been trying him in the outfield. And especially with Jimenez being out for so long, I feel like that's, excuse me, I feel like that's something that we could definitely see sometime. Give it a month or two, wait for the minor league season to start, see if you can get some reps down there first. But overall, this is still a very stacked lineup with a good amount of balance as well, because you got Eaton and Grandal from the left side of the plate. You got Tim Anderson and Jose Abreu from the right side, amongst others. You got the talent from all the prospects who are going to have big roles. So I definitely see a ton of upside for this team. In terms of final prediction, what are you thinking?
I got them winning the AL Central, and I got them going to the ALCS. And I'm not going to tell you that result because it might be a team that we cover that could be in the end of that one. But the Chicago White Sox are heading to the ALCS. I believe wholeheartedly in this team. And one more thing, he's not a big, sexy name, but they also brought in Jake Lamb.
They did, and I like him as a platoon infielder a lot. He's a left-handed bat as well, so I mean, he definitely provides a little bit of balance. But I mean, as much I love the upside of this team, I could see them going to the ALCS. But I truly believe in the Minnesota Twins. I thought they had an amazing offseason too, and it just to me doesn't get enough credit how good of a team they have. It's going to be a two-team race. I got the White Sox finishing 95 and 67, but finishing second in the division.
All right. All right. We'll have to see how that goes. But we're going to transition over to the Yankees. And Swig, we have a nice guest that's able to join us today. It's going to be Drew. Swig, why don't you introduce him real quick?
Yeah, I got my friend Drew Felger to come on. Big Yankees fan like me, really knows his stuff. I'm excited to hear his input. Drew, thanks for coming on, man. We appreciate it.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me. I look forward to it.
All right. And without further ado, you look at this Yankees team, and we've already gone through the Cubs, we've gone through the White Sox, and now you look at this Yankees team, and they've had so many high hopes these last few years where the roster seems to be there, but then they get to postseason time, and then things just sort of fall apart. But then you look at how they went about the offseason. Now you look at their starting rotation. They lost some big names, Masahiro Tanaka being one of those. James Paxton went back to Seattle. But they filled the rotation with Corey Kluber. They get Domingo Germán back, who's a little bit of a wild card. Severino should be back at some point. How do you guys feel about the rotation and some of the moves they made in the offseason?
Yeah, I feel like the rotation's in better shape than it was last year. If Kluber's just, what he is in his career, not even Cy Young Kluber, just his career averages, I mean, that's a way better number two than Paxton or Tanaka ever was. And then add on top of Tyon, and if he's healthy, 180 innings from him, that's a fantastic number three, probably one of the best in the MLB. And then obviously the bottom two in the rotation round that out to be a pretty solid rotation.
If the Yankees rotation is able to stay healthy, it definitely has the capability to be one of the better rotations in the league, I would say. But health has definitely been one of the biggest X factors for the Yankees in recent years. They've had a ton of injuries, both in the rotation and then the lineup. And then one question I wanted to ask is the two main additions in the rotation were Kluber and Tyon, and both of them are coming off of pretty significant injuries. Considering their injury history, do you think it was a good approach to kind of go for the high risk, high reward kind of pitchers to fill out the rotation?
I do, but that's just because I think risky moves can pay off. If one of the two pays off, then I think it was worth it, because Sevy's going to come back midseason, and if he's 80% of what he is, which you'd expect that, because usually pitchers pick up velocity after Tommy John surgery, then I think it's pretty good. Devi Garcia, he struggled in spring, but I still think he's phenomenal young pitcher. Clark Schmidt, obviously he's on the 60-day DL, but he's another one of those really good young arms. So I think they had the depth to cover making two risky moves because the upside was so high. And if both pan out, you're talking about maybe the best rotation in the MLB.
Yeah, and starting pitching depth wins in this league. Once you get to the postseason, you really see the starters take form. I mean, you look at the Indians and what they've done. I mean, it seems like year after year, they just bring in another kid, and he's like the next Cy Young Award winner. Then they trade off someone else, and they bring someone else in. So it's nice to have that depth. You mentioned Deivi Garcia. I'm a big Clark Schmidt guy. He gets a lot of ground balls. I'm excited to see him in New York here in the future. But I also agree. I think that makes a lot of sense to bring in these high risk, high reward players like Kluber and Tyone. I mean, those two, they're coming off of injury derailed seasons. Kluber, the last two, Tyone. You saw him a little bit in Pittsburgh, but last year he didn't pitch at all. So I think it's two moves that are cheap deals, which is huge because they were trying to stay under the luxury tax, and it makes a lot of sense for the club.
Yeah, and the luxury tax really dictated a lot of the Yankees' offseason approach. We've seen that a couple of times in recent years, and I know we kind of hit on that in a previous episode about the tax penalties and everything. One other question that I wanted to ask with the rotation, we've kind of hit on this before, is the real X factor, a wild card, is definitely Domingo Germán in my mind, who hasn't pitched in a game since September of 2019 due to some pretty disturbing off-the-field things. But quickly, just on the field for a moment here, what do you think we can expect from him at the back end of the Yankees rotation?
I think he's been solid in spring. He obviously beat Devi out, but Devi did not pitch very well. So I think if he just gives what he gave the last time, even if it's a 4.0, 450 ERA, like for a fifth guy in the rotation, that's not bad, especially if he's going to eat up innings and save the bullpen from taxing their arms. It could be a big move. And Jordan Montgomery's a lot of the same. If he just pitches to what he's capable of, doesn't do anything spectacular, just is what he is, they're really good back into the rotation pieces for the Yankees.
There's a lot of like bold predictions that are going to be happening here in this episode and have happened already, but I got one right here. If Germán sits around a 4.50 ERA and the depth is there, you're seeing good progress out of Tyone, you're seeing the innings out of Kluber, and then you get Severino back. I could see Germán potentially going into the bullpen and being a legit force down the stretch. You think that could happen?
It's a possibility, but I could also see the Yankees trading him at that point to see if they can get another piece, maybe a hitter, because I think their hitting staff has flaws. So maybe they do something like that to go get a bat down the stretch.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how the Yankees approach the trade deadline. It almost always seems like pitching is a need. This year, they seem to have a little bit more depth if everyone is healthy, but that could obviously change at any point. I know we'll get into the lineup here in a second, but I did want to talk about the bullpen really quick first to round out the pitching staff. A lot of the same guys are back, but two of the Yankees' top three left-handed arms in Zach Britton and Justin Wilson are going to be on the injured list to begin the season. Britton in particular is going to be out for several months. How do you think the Yankees are going to be able to offset their losses? Do you think they'll be able to survive that and still play above average baseball?
Yeah, I mean, O'Day was a big pickup for that because Ottavino really gave nothing last year. So in my opinion, O'Day kind of countersets what would be Britton. He's obviously not as good as Britton, but he's a very good replacement level player for him. And Chad Green's phenomenal. And then our Aroldis Chapman, I personally think he's not that good just because he can't finish in the postseason. But he's not a bad closer for regular season. So those three should be able to hold the fort down while the other two get healthy.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, their bullpen is solid. I mean, you get Adam Warren back. It seems like it's his 15th time back in New York. And there's still a lot of people in that pitchers that could just round out that bullpen, at least to buy some time, because that's all you need. You don't need these guys to go out there and pitch to sub 3 every single time. I mean, if you get that out of some of your players, that's good. O'Day's funky though. I mean, you saw him a lot in Baltimore against the Yankees, where he's got that sidearm motion. I think he's going to be a nice force. He's battled some injury issues as well the last few years in Atlanta, but I think he could be an X factor in that bullpen.
Yeah, I did really like the O'Day pickup. And after the Yankees traded out of Vino, we knew that they were going to target a bullpen arm. He was one of the top guys left on the market. And while he's definitely more of a right-handed specialist due to being that right-handed pitcher, I do agree that he could definitely help offset the loss of Britton in particular. And I know this is Justin Wilson's second time back with the Yankees as well. He's usually a relatively stable pitcher who provides a little bit of depth. What I'm really curious to see is who fills out the back end of that bullpen, what the Yankees can rely on out of guys like Jonathan Loaizaga, Luis Sessa. See, one of them would be the long man if if a starter has a rough night, or if the Yankees go back to using the opener strategy at any point. That's definitely one area where I think the Yankees have been somewhat inconsistent in recent years, and I'm curious to see if one of them can take a step forward.
Yeah, I think Sessa fills the long man role pretty well, personally. He did it last year pretty well, so I would expect him to do much of the same this year.
Now let's get into the lineup real quick. I mean, we saw a lot of these bats. You've seen the career year from Luke Voigt. You're seeing Urshela really turning around these last few years to where he's swinging the bat and playing defense. And of course, you locked up DJ LeMahieu. That's huge. I mean, I've never seen someone get on base as much as him. And plus, the short ballpark helps his power numbers that he didn't really produce a lot of in Coors Field, which is surprising because of the altitude. But still, he's a solid baseball player. It's still a little too right-handed for me. And then you see Gary Sanchez. I mean, he always looks good in spring, but once he travels back to New York, the weather starts to get cold. He doesn't make contact. So I think that lineup's definitely interesting.
Well, first of all, I got to say, I'm impressed you talked about the Yankees lineup without mentioning Judge, Stanton, or Torres at any point.
They're never healthy.
I mean, neither are a couple other guys, but I mean, I feel like those three are when healthy, the three best hitters for the Yankees outside of LeMahieu, who's been the team MVP the last couple of seasons. But one question that I know we've discussed before, and we'll get another look at it, but outside of Aaron Hicks, who's a switch hitter, and the Yankees lineup is going to be entirely right-handed when all the starters are playing. How much of an impact do you think that relative lack of balance is going to have on the season, especially as they play teams with good bullpens like the Rays and the Indians going into the season?
I mean, with the right-handed lineup, it's less of an issue. Lefties tend to struggle more with left-handed pitchers than right-handed batters do with right-handed pitchers. So it's not as bad as it may look. But if I were the Yankees, I would have traded Hicks and I would have traded Urshela. I don't think Hicks is that good defensively, and he's a horrible hitter. He gets on base, sure, and hits power, but it's either a walk or a home run. He doesn't do anything in between. And then Urshela, he's the odd man out on this offense. Frazier's better than him, and he's younger. And Urshela's not that great defensively. So that would be the move I would make. And if I look in the lineup and see the weakness, it's add two left-handed bats to replace them and make them contact hitters. And this lineup becomes pretty solid.
Yeah, right now I feel like the Yankees lineup is high risk, high reward, a lot of home runs, a lot of strikeouts. I know we've seen that the last couple of years. I expect that to continue. I'm especially with you on Urshela. Like, I like him a lot. He's exceeded all possible expectations, considering he took over for Andujar with no fanfare whatsoever when he got hurt a couple seasons ago. But I feel like he has kind of reached his ceiling, and if we could sell a high on him, I think it would be a smart move. One thing we have to talk about is definitely Luke Voigt being injured. Unfortunately, tearing his meniscus. He's going to be out at least the first month of the season. How creative do you think the Yankees are going to be, playing that first base spot? Do you think LeMahieu is going to slide back over? Do you think how much of Jay Bruce do you think we'll see there? Things like that.
I think Bruce can really balance the lineup out. He's not asking him to hit his career marks. If he hits 220 to 240 with that short porch, he could do some serious damage. So I would expect him to play there quite a bit. I would expect LeMahieu to shift over late innings, maybe Tyler Wade to spell in it for defense, because that's what Boone tends to do. So that's what I would think would happen. And I think Bruce will get a lot of play. Maybe Stanton. I don't know if he's taking reps there or not, but it could be worth looking at.
Yeah, it's interesting. What I wanted them to do last off season, or not off season, but at the deadline, I wanted them to go get Mike Yastrzemski and Brandon Belt from San Francisco. I thought Yastrzemski would have played that ballpark well. And you go back and talk about Boston hating him, but it would be interesting there. But I thought he was someone that gets on base a lot. His RBI numbers would go up because he's on a more consistent offense. And he puts up big power numbers in San Francisco. But that's beside the point. They didn't do it. Now there's a lot of right-handed hitters. I like Bruce at first base. I'll be honest. I liked him over there. He played a little bit there in Seattle. And then in his last stop, he played a little first base. He's really started to turn into that. He wasn't really the best right fielder in Cincinnati, but I think he could do a solid job of holding his own over there, at least until Voit gets back.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to confuse him for Mark Teixeira defensively, but hopefully he can be stable enough to not be a complete disaster over there. We've seen a couple of defensive lapses at points over the last couple of years with the Yankees. So I'm hoping, like Drew said, he can just be a stable bat. You know, we're not expecting him to be what he was at his peak with the Reds, but if he can chip in some occasional power and some stable defense, he can be taken out late in close games so they can move LeMahieu or Wade over to first base because they are better defensive players. Outside of that, the left-handed bats are mostly going to be rotating bench guys. Brett Gardner was brought back for another year. Mike Tauchman will make the roster. So I am curious to see what impact those two have. One other thing I wanted to talk about is that going into this season, it looks like Clint Frazier's finally cemented as the starting everyday left fielder. I definitely like him a lot. How do you think he's going to fare in his first season as the full-time starter?
You know, I've been high on him ever since the Yankees traded him. His swing is really quick. And when he keeps his head still and his front foot down, he can hit the ball out of the ballpark, and he has a high contact rate. He doesn't strike out a ton. So defensively is where the question mark lies for him. He has had the concussions and he's leery around walls, but I think he's a good defender. And a couple of years ago with all the errors, I think it was just him having lingering stuff from concussions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Sometimes, like, especially with concussions, you lose them in the light sometimes. And that's really when it messes up, because it's like that light that you had before, you're not supposed to deal with it, but it gets crazy with that. But I think this is a breakout year for Clint Frazier. I think if the Yankees want to go deep into the postseason and get to the World Series or potentially win the World Series, Clint Frazier is going to have to be that dude that steps in there and plays almost every single day out there, because that's something that you need. You need someone that can give you stability in that lineup on a consistent basis. I mean, I've never seen someone this unfortunate in the way they've been used in a very long time. I mean, he gets called up, then sent down, then he's not playing a lot. Now he's going to come in there and hit, and his defense will play. I mean, you got Fenway for some of the games. I mean, that's going to hide you in left a little bit, but I think this is a huge breakout year for Clint Frazier.
He's definitely got the talent, and Drew mentioned the bat speed that was highly touted when the Yankees got him from Cleveland originally. So we definitely see how talented and productive a player he can be, and he has been for the most part when he has been with the Yankees. Part of the reason he's been so up and down is because the Yankees having a good amount of outfield depth, especially in the rare occasions where Judge and Stanton are both healthy at the same time. And that's definitely one more key we got to talk about, that we have seen the Yankees have a decent amount of depth offensively to help be an above average offensive team, even with their two of their main sluggers out of the lineup for extended periods. If this is the year that they're able to stay healthy, if Torres is able to stay healthy and bounce back a little bit, which I think is a safer bet, if the Yankees can get anything out of Gary Sanchez, how dangerous do you think this lineup can be?
At its peak, you're talking 50 home runs from Stanton and Judge each. So there's 100, and 40 from Torres. He's done it before. 40 from Sanchez. That's 180 bombs from 4 bats. That's what it is at their peak. Sanchez, he's going to hit under 200. Mm-hmm. He always does. It seems like he strikes out a lot. So I don't think he's that good. Kyle Higashioka probably will overtake him as the starter at some point. And Torres, he came into spring training in better shape. So I'm expecting him to have the year he had 2 years ago, not the year he had last year.
I agree on Torres.
I want to see Gleyber Torres pick up a glove and play some defense, because that's been his main thing for so many years. In a lineup this deep, I mean, even when they're out of the lineup with Judge, Stanton missing time, there's still enough depth to where he doesn't have to be that main slugger the entire time. You still have LeMahieu, you still have Voit, you still, well, when he comes back, but Urshela, you have a lot of bats around you. So if he focuses a little bit more on defense and starts to become an MLB shortstop, I personally don't think he's an MLB shortstop right now. If he starts playing some defense, I think it could do wonders for him and the Yankees.
I think Torres has the talent to be the Yankees' most complete player overall. He's still only 23 years old. The upside is enormous with him, and I definitely expect him to bounce back. He's had a very good spring so far. I think we can kind of wrap this up by going into looking at the AL East. The Blue Jays have been incredibly active. They're supposed to, they should be taking a step forward. We know the Rays are always there as a very good team, very sneaky under the radar additions for them. What kind of expectations do you have for the Yankees in the 2021 season?
They need to win the East. This roster has the talent to do it. They have the talent to go to the World Series if everything's healthy. But if everything's not healthy, they've shown the past 2 years they have a shot to win the East. And I would expect them to win the East this year. If you get either one of Judge or Stanton healthy for the entire year, you have probably the best power hitter in the entire MLB sitting in your lineup every single day. And that plays because that makes the rest of the lineup better because you have to pitch to that guy. You can't avoid him. And that's a big deal.
I agree 100%. They offer protection for everyone else in the lineup when they're healthy. And while Stanton's been injured, especially in his couple years in New York, he had a very good postseason last year. We saw just how much value he can provide to the team if he can stay healthy. It's kind of easy to forget the first year he was in New York, he had 38 home runs and 100 RBIs. It's mostly just been staying on the field for him. And if he's able to do that, I have little doubt that he's going to produce a lot of runs. I agree that winning the division should be the baseline for this team. I'm sick of the excuses. That's a talented team that's gotten close the last couple of years. I'd like to see them get over that hump.
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
It's difficult for this team.
Yeah, I got this team so far this season. Yeah, you heard in the AL Central. I already went through the White Sox real quick. Now you look at the AL East, and you look at where I have the AL East finishing. I got the Yankees, Blue Jays, Rays, Red Sox, Orioles. I think that's just how it's going to play out in that division. Yankees winning that one, of course. And you already heard my ALCS. And I originally, going back to the White Sox segment, I originally had them winning the ALCS, but I got the Yankees winning now with the loss of Eloy Jimenez. It's going to be Yankees, White Sox, ALCS, and the Yankees are going to the World Series.
I don't see it happening. Aaron Boone's a horrible manager. I hate to say it. He's horrible. He pinch hitting Mike Ford, who hadn't hit the ball in 2 months. He's using Gary Sanchez as a defensive substitute for Kyle Higashioka, who is a good defender. It's like, dude, like you're pulling people two outs, you're letting them stay in too long, or you're not quick enough to pull them. And it's like, I can go out there and manage this roster better than you in the playoffs.
Yeah, I know I haven't made it any secret, both on and off the pod here, how much I didn't care for some of his stunts in the Rays series. No, we talked about the opener stunt with Garcia and Happ and trying to outsmart everyone. It's just, it's not something he's capable of doing. I agree, but hopefully he's not somebody that limits the ceiling of the team. I think there's definitely evidence that he is doing that, but I definitely hope as a Yankees fan that it doesn't play out that way. I'm sure you agree. Hopefully we see a little bit of maturation here over the course of the season, but considering he's going into his fourth year, I'd be surprised.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the only other thing really left is like, if the starting pitching's healthy, that's 4 fantastic starters for the postseason. Cole as your ace. At his best, he's the best pitcher in baseball. At his, average, he's top 5. Kluber, guy's good if he's healthy. Taillon, good if he's healthy. And then Severino, he's coming back mid-year. I would expect him to be back close to form by end of year. That's 2 aces with Severino and Cole and 2 other guys that have ace potential. That's a heck of a rotation that they didn't have last year at their disposal, which one of them goes deep, saves the bullpen, and allows you not to use Chapman for 2 innings.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's that. And if the hitting could just put the ball in play and not strike out 20 times,
Yeah.
they would.
No, I agree completely. Both with the rotation and the lineup, the Yankees are definitely built as a high risk, high reward kind of team. Hopefully, it's the year that we see a little bit more payoffs as biased Yankees fans, but it's definitely a feast or famine kind of approach. But Drew, I definitely want to thank you for coming on, taking the time to talk Yankees with us today. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, just thank you guys for having me. It was a blast talking to you, and go Yankees.
Go Yankees.
We'll be back with the Mets segment after this. I appreciate it, Drew.
Yep.
And let's get into the Mets talk. We got some Mets coming up. We appreciate Drew joining us there, but we got the Mets, and I'm so excited to talk about them because this team, I mean, you look, man, they look so good on paper. Their lineup is solid. Their pitching rotation isn't that healthy right now, but down the stretch it's going to be healthy. And I like this Mets team a ton. I'm going to watch a lot of their games this year.
Well, I hate them, but I think they had a very good offseason. I mean, this is a team that we talked about the White Sox having an active offseason. The Mets blew everyone out of the water. In general, pretty much 28 teams were pretty quiet in the offseason. And then you have the White Sox and the Mets going out and getting whoever they want or need. And we talked about the impact that Steve Cohen's going to have on this team in terms of their financial approach and getting rid of some of the toxic figures in the front office. But then also the Jared Porter situation came out, and that's not a great look for them either. But overall, the vibes around this team are still way more positive than negative at the moment. I think it's fair to say, though, that the big question, this episode's going to drop on opening day, is Francisco Lindor going to be locked up by then?
Yeah, he's went back and forth. Obviously, we're recording here on Monday. He countered with an insane 12 for 385 offer, which, I mean, I if I had the money, I'd pay Francisco Lindor every single dollar in my pocket because you imagine what he could bring. I mean, he looks good in any uniform. He's got the smile, the defense, the charisma. He's got the pop from both sides. A GM's dream right there. And I quote that from MLB The Show.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that's an MLB The Show quote because I don't think having a good smile is a prerequisite to be a good player. But I feel like Billy Beane wouldn't like that one as much. But look, Lindor, like we talked about, at least as of recording, the Mets offered 10 for 325. He wanted 12 for 385. We talked about this off pod. I'm going to make the prediction they meet in the middle, go 11 for 350. I have no doubt that the Mets are going to get him locked up because he is entering the last year of his contract, similar to when the Dodgers traded for Mookie Betts last year from the Red Sox, had 1 year left. The priority is to get one of the best players in baseball when healthy locked up, right? And the Mets, considering what was invested into him, they're not just going to take the risk that he becomes a free agent and leaves after one season. That would be incredibly pointless. No matter how much upside the Mets have, I don't see that happening. And Cohen has the financial ability to get it done, and I have no doubt that they will. Overall, though, the Mets have a very good lineup as well. They made a lot of big moves. They brought in James McCann to be the catcher. They have that pitching rotation, which is above average as always, even with Carlos Carrasco being injured at the moment. And even with Noah Syndergaard not back from Tommy John surgery. It's just, you see the talent on this team, but they're not the only talented team in the division either.
They aren't. The Braves are looking good. I mean, I saw earlier today, or Mike Soroka, he actually went and started on Tuesday, and he's finally starting to get there. I think he might end up being there in their rotation by May. But the Braves are good. This division's good. It's not just those two teams. I mean, the Nationals got better, bringing in Josh Bell, Kyle Schwarber, John Lester. They get Strasburg back. The believe it or not, the Marlins were a playoff team last year. I don't think that'll stick, but they were. And then the Phillies, they're an interesting team as well. But going to your point on the Mets right here, I think they got the best bullpen in the major leagues. And it's crazy, but it's not just there. You look up and down this team, and I know I talked about the rotation being tested a little bit. The reason I believe the Mets will win the division is because of how much solid depth they have. You look up and down the lineup, there's depth at every single position. In the outfield, you have backup outfielders like Albert Almora, Kevin Pillar. You look at first base, you have Dom Smith in case Alonso goes down. I'm sure Smith will play some left field. JD Davis can move around to first, third, left. You have Jonathan VR, who seems to put up an all-star season and then fall off the face of the earth, so you don't know what you're getting there. And then, I mean, there's so much depth. There's Jose Martinez, the pitching staff, in the rotation, top to bottom. I mean, you have Jordan Yamamoto, who shined a little bit, David Peterson, who's nice, Taijuan Walker, who's had a few good years. I mean, there's so much depth on this team. I could keep on talking for days.
Yeah, I mean, let's address it one area at a time, right? So we'll do starting rotation, talk about the bullpen, and then talk about the lineup to finish off, okay? So right now with the rotation, obviously Jacob deGrom, ace, he'll be the number one pitcher again until proven otherwise. And for the Mets' sake, I hope that doesn't happen. And he, as usual, has had a great spring. With Carlos Carrasco being hurt to begin the season, and we know he'll have a pretty big role, Syndergaard as well. Marcus Stroman is going to be the number two to begin the season, and he's a very good pitcher when he's healthy, gets a lot of ground balls. The rest of the rotation, right now, it appears that Taijuan Walker is going to be the number three. David Peterson, who had a good rookie year that's not being talked about enough, is going to be the number four. Again, small sample size, but I definitely think he could stick. Right now, with Carrasco and Syndergaard both being hurt, I think Joey Lucchesi is going to end up being the number five to start the season. And he is the guy that can only go about 5 innings into a game, but he has his moments as the number five starter with the Padres the last couple of years. When Carrasco and Syndergaard come back, we talked about Severino coming back at 80% for the Yankees. If Syndergaard can come back at 80% for the Mets, you're adding an all-star to a rotation that's already got a ton of talent. So I definitely see the upside there. It could be the best rotation in baseball, but we've also talked about that with the Mets going back 3 or 4 years now.
Yeah. The thing with that, though, is they didn't have the lineup to balance it out. But I think Lucchese's nice there. He has a funky delivery. If you haven't seen it, I mean, he's got the wheels it down, brings it up. I mean, it's the most craziest windup you've ever seen. But I mean, there's so much depth in this pitching rotation that, I mean, you have guys like Jordan Yamamoto, Mike Montgomery had to be released. I mean, he's a decent starter at times, and I mean, it doesn't matter. I think some of these guys could be. I mean, I'd honestly pay to go watch the Syracuse Mets every single game because of how much depth this team has.
Tim Tebow's not even there anymore, man. Come on. But the Mets do have a lot of depth. They were very aggressive in free agency, and they've made it clear that if they need somebody, they're going to go out and buy them. And I don't mean that as a criticism. The Yankees have definitely signed people to big contracts before. Not trying to be a hypocrite here, but we're seeing the Mets finally approach free agency or transactions like a big market team with financial resources should after decades of not doing so. Well, let's move on to the bullpen here, right? So Edwin Diaz is going to be the closer. His first season with the Mets was complete shit. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to deny that. He was very disappointing in that first season, but he bounced back in a big way in 2020. And it's a smaller sample size, but I feel like that's definitely something that he can build off of here in a full season. And with only 20% capacity in New York right now, if he does struggle, there won't be as many boos getting to him. So I mean, New Yorkers are pretty impatient people. I can attest to that, but I feel like Diaz is definitely going to build off of a strong season. You have Uris Familia in that bullpen. You have Dylan Betances in that bullpen. They brought in Aaron Loop. So you see all the upside they have. They got left-handed and right-handed pitchers. The one point right now is Seth Lugo is hurt to begin the season, and he's been a really versatile piece for the Mets the last couple of seasons. But they brought in Miguel Castro. They brought in Trevor May, who I haven't even mentioned yet. So they have what could be 5 or 6 I'd say above average arms in that bullpen. If they have 1 or 2 guys struggle in the beginning of blowouts that they either win by 12 or lose by 12, who really cares?
That's fair. I think Edwin Diaz is going to lead the National League in saves. I'm going to be honest here. They have a good enough team. They have a good enough record. I think he gets enough save opportunities, and he is dynamite. I mean, we've already seen him do it in the American League. And I hate that Mets fans. I know a Mets fan that doesn't necessarily watch every game, but he still like follows the team and watches a majority of the games. And he's like, oh, Edwin Diaz sucks. I was like, well, did you just watch the beginning of last year? Because that's what happened. I mean, people saw the year before and then the beginning of last year. I could attest. I raised my hand to this when I was the same way about Craig Kimbrell. And I know I just said a couple minutes ago to trade him as soon as possible. But I think Edwin Diaz can lead this team in saves and lead the entire National League in saves. That's how solid he is. But you speak to the depth of the bullpen. Trevor May, he's capable of saving games. dare I say, Uri's Familia on this thing without getting punched in the face by Mets fans. He's had the capability of doing so, and there's just a lot of people that can do a lot of things.
It's true. I mean, Dylan Betances wasn't very good when he was in the closer role, which didn't last long with the Yankees. He was at his best in the seventh or eighth inning. He was up and down in his first season with the Mets, but you have guys like him and Chasen Shreve, it just guys who are above average pitchers when they're at their best. And I really like Aaron Loop as the left-handed specialist, kind of the sidearm guy who can fill in a specific role in the Mets bullpen. And they brought in Miguel Castro as well. So I see guys with electric stuff and with things that they can play to their strengths. Overall, the Mets have one of the better pitching staffs in baseball again, but they've had one of the better starting rotations. The bullpen, I think, is a top half of the league bullpen at the moment. I think it could be top five, but outside of half a season of Edwin Diaz, they haven't had proven production from him yet. I think it's coming. I agree with you, but because last season was such a short year, it's a relatively small sample size and things could go south quickly, but I don't expect them to. I did want to talk about the lineup a little bit as well. So two things to mention here. Robinson Cano is suspended for all of 2021. I believe this is his third PED suspension, second PED suspension, going back to his days with the Mariners. And that allows Jeff McNeil to play his natural position of second base on a full-time basis now. The Mets lineup, there's no DH this year, so I'm curious to see how creative they are with Dominic Smith, who was good at last season, but they can't rotate him and Alonso through that DH or left field spot anymore for the time being. But they also have a ton of major league capable players. We mentioned Kevin Pillar a few minutes ago. They got Malik Smith as well in the outfield. We talked about Jonathan VR, and I'm really curious to see what role he has, because third base with JD Davis, to me, is the biggest question mark in their roster, or excuse me, in their lineup as it currently stands.
I would agree. And I think we could potentially see, if he struggles over there, you could see McNeil move to third, VR play second. I think that speaks to the versatility of this team. And the team isn't just deep, but they're versatile as well. And if you look at the lineup, there's a lot of left-right, similar to the Cubs lineup. It's weird because the Yankees, White Sox, a lot of right-hand dominant with power. Cubs, Mets, more balanced and more guys that can do unique things. Lindor's a switch hitter. You have the lefties of McNeil, Dom Smith. You have Nimmo. I mean, there's just a lot of left-handed. Conforto. They balance off the right-handers, such as McCann, and I could go on for days and Alonso. But anyway, there's just so many pieces that could just platoon like that, and you don't really need to bench anybody for those things. It's just left, right, left, right. It makes it bad for a bullpen, even with the 3 batter minimums, to try to play matchups. And I think this Mets team could really take off.
Yeah, the lineup could be scary if everyone's able to stay healthy. I do expect Pete Alonso to bounce back a little bit. He didn't have a great 2020 season after that monster 2019 rookie year with the 50-plus home runs, but yeah, we all know how good he is. I really like Brandon Nimmo and Conforto in the outfield as those left-handed bats. I do think McNeil will be able to settle in a bit now with less of that infield rotation. To me, the catcher spot is one thing. Like as much as I expect James McCann to be a decent catcher, I don't expect him to quite live up to the contract he got. And that is one thing that you're going to see a lot from a team like the Mets, who are now operating like a fully operational Death Star with the financial resources, right? The thing with these contracts, it's not the money they're making, it's the years. And I feel like McCann is more of a 1 or 2 year option before he's going to start to have some flaws in his game. And the Mets behind him, Tomas Nido, to me, is a decent backup, nothing more, nothing less. So if something does go wrong with McCann, I'd be curious to see how they approach the catcher spot. But outside of that, with Cespedes, that situation last season, right? I mean, he's obviously a wild card, but the Mets have, to me, one of the better lineups in baseball. They have what could be the best rotation in baseball once they get everyone back healthy. And they have the bullpen that, to me, has the upside to be top 5 or top 10 in the league. So to me, I see a very complete and deep roster with a lot of versatility and a lot of major league quality players who aren't going to end up making the team because they have so much organizational depth.
Yeah, I think that's true. If you look at the catcher position, if something were to happen to McCann, they did sign Caleb Joseph behind him, who was born one day before our birthdays, June 18th. So that was something. Or
That
yours
is
is,
my
yeah,
birthday,
that is your
dog.
birthday. How about that? How about
Yeah.
that? I thought we were the same one, but I guess you were a day early. But anyway, I think he's not good. Let's be honest, but he's still a veteran backstop that can come in and catch, and sort of like the Rene Rivera of this team that could just fill a role. But and outside of that, what are your predictions on the Mets?
I got the Mets going 96 and what does that leave? 66, I believe. My math is good. It's hard to do 162, man, but I do have them finishing second in the division. I really, really like the Braves as well. I think the Braves are going to crack 100 wins.
Here's where I have it, and I'll actually go through all my divisions now that I already said the things on the other ones. AL West, I have Astros, Angels, Athletics, Mariners, Rangers. Watch out for the Mariners; they're going to be good in a year or two. AL Central, White Sox, Twins, Indians, Royals, Tigers. AL East, Yankees, Blue Jays, Rays, Red Sox, Orioles. NL West, Dodgers, Padres, Giants, D-backs, Rockies. NL Central, I already said Brewers, Cardinals, Cubs, Reds, Pirates. NL East, right here. Mets, Braves, Nationals, Phillies, Marlins. I got the Mets in first place. NL Wild Card, Padres versus Braves. NLDS, Brewers versus Mets. NLDS, Braves versus Dodgers. Braves beat the Padres in their wild card. NLCS, Braves, Mets. Those two will end up meeting in the NLCS. AL Wild Card, Twins, Blue Jays. ALDS, Astros, Yankees. Again, this time the Yankees defeat them. ALDS, Blue Jays, White Sox. Yankees, White Sox. World Series, Braves versus Yankees. Atlanta Braves win the World Series.
Interesting. So you got the Braves not winning the division, but winning the World Series. That's kind of an interesting one. I could definitely see it though. The Yankees get to the World Series, I'll be pleasantly surprised, but I'm never going to be satisfied unless they win the damn championship, man. I mean, it's been 12 years now. Come on. I mean, I want to be spoiled again. But I do like the Mets a lot, but I feel like the Braves are going to take that step forward with that scary lineup at the moment. And in the National League, though, I don't think anyone's beating the Dodgers. I just don't see it. But I didn't go quite as in depth on the playoff predictions. But my prediction, I can't talk too much about the whole not winning the division thing, but I got the Dodgers beating the Twins in the World Series. I really do believe in Minnesota. And as long as they're fortunate enough to avoid us in the playoffs, for whatever reason, they have a lot of trouble with the Yankees. If they're able to play somebody else, they're going to advance this time. And I got them going all the way to the World Series. But the Dodgers are just stacked.
Yeah, the Dodgers. I mean, Dustin May that came out, he's their fifth starter. I mean, that dude would be an ace on like 15 teams, and he'd probably be the number two on everybody else. So Dustin May is insane. But I mean, it's crazy their depth. You don't even want to get to that. But anyway, that's going to wrap it up. I don't. Do you have anything? Any parting words? Any bold takes?
I'm just going to go out here. The Rockies are going to win 45 games or less.
Oh, Rockies 45 or less.
That could easily backfire, but we all know they're going to suck. And the culture around that team right now, basically being forced to trade Nolan Arenado, I just see a disastrous season coming for them. I think it'll be, at the very least, it'll be 110 or more losses.
All right. My bold take is I don't know if this is necessarily bold, but Ronald Acuna Jr. has a 40-40 season. He's now full time in right field, saves his legs a little bit, maybe steals more bags.
Ooh, that would be something. I think Alfonso Soriano was the last one to go 40-40, if I remember right. Only four guys in that club, and Soriano's the only one without the PEDs, the performance enhancing drugs flag next to him, because the others were Bonds and A-Rod and who was I forget the other one.
Oh,
I think it was Canseco.
might have been when he used to have legs.
Yeah, exactly. Or be able to last in a boxing ring more than 10 seconds. But anyway, I think Acuna's got the talent to be a 40-40 player, but we'll see how many games are played. It just hopefully the Braves and anyone else doesn't have too many taken away with cancellations and pauses. I know we're going to see things with that throughout the season, but the only thing that would keep him from doing so is teams are less aggressive on the base paths now than ever. We're seeing less stolen bases in general. We're seeing the power approach be more important than anything else. So he has the speed to steal 40. I just don't know how many times they're going to be aggressive with him on the base pass.
That's fair. You look at the catchers in that division. JT's missing some time. Maybe he could take some more bags early in the year against the Phillies, but just a long thought process there. But that's going to wrap it up for today. I appreciate everybody that tuned in. I appreciate Drew joining us earlier. That was good on the Yankee stuff. And everybody, check us out everywhere. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts. Literally anywhere that you want to pick up your phone and listen or watch us, we're everywhere. So make sure you subscribe everywhere. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, click the 5 stars if we deserve it. Also leave a review. And for Swig, for Dylan Kearns, this is the Big City Sports Podcast. We will see you next time.